Hi, I'm Kyle Carlin. This is my case study for EDL 851, Supervision and Evaluation. I'm currently at the KSDE Leadership Conference, and I'm trying to record this real quick before in a gap in between the sessions. And so I'm going to go through with this, and hopefully we can get done in time for me to go mingle and hang out with some other people here at the Leadership Conference. First of all, this problem was about a high-quality teacher who really started to have some struggles. Started at the end of one school year and carried over into the next school year, and really caused a lot of difficulties for the staff as well as parent-teacher relationships. And so, I'm going to talk about this. The case study going through here. So what do I know? I know that this is an elementary school that does have a very positive climate and has staff with a common vision. The teacher in question was an exemplar teacher, award-winning teacher that started to have some difficulties at home. Seems like there may be some other things going on. As an administrator, I'd hope I'd be talking to her before this point about, hey, what's going on? How, getting to know a little bit at least trying to get to know her. Maybe she doesn't want to share, but at least trying to. This teacher has also had less self-control with peers, complaining a lot more, being a lot more vocal about the curriculum change, been a little bit more harsh with students, sounds like, and then in the meeting with the parent where she became very upset when the facts were kind of laid out there in a way that, maybe if you could say maybe she wasn't aware how it was affecting the students, but once the parent was expressing that concern, to become that upset is definitely seems to be out of character for this teacher in particular. And the fact that she wasn't prepared for the meeting, that just adds to the frustration and harms that relationship, but also shows maybe it's a change in behavior, that maybe there's something else going on there with this teacher. We know that several parents have complained to the principal and board members, and that this teacher also has become less engaged in school, even during the summertime where she wasn't coming up as much. And again, tells you she's just less engaged, distracted in many ways around school, and a lot more frustration and other things probably. So what do we need to know? We need to know, is there something more going on with Mrs. Horton that can be supported either through some extended time off or some other things, additional coaching or other supports that might be able to be put in place. I'd like to know if other feedback has been given any other time besides the time the principal was talking with her. Like even at the end of the year last year, I feel like somebody should have at least been talking to her. The principal should have been talking to her at least a little bit about the performance, the dip in performance, trying to figure things out early on, and especially at the beginning of the school year when it continued. Not knowing this school district, what are the evaluation criteria for veteran teachers? Some teachers, they do it every year. Some it's every 3 years. Is this teacher on an evaluation cycle? If she's not on an evaluation cycle, is there a way that the principal can start an evaluation process in an off year if there are concerns? And then also, what corrective actions are available to me as a school leader? I think before having a conversation with Ms. Horton, or at least it was following that and in the short term after, need to know what the options are and figure out how can we make Mrs. Horton more effective, and know that way we can lay it out very clearly of this is the path that we are going to be going down unless behavior changes, which will get us to this other path. And I think those kind of things are important to include. So the main part of the problem is basically that Mrs. Horton has had a change in her behavior in the last 6 months. Change is negatively affecting her relationships. The behavior has become less professional, and parents are wanting things to change, and there's people pushing for decisions to be made that I, as a school leader, have to act on, either in making those changes or in communicating why that change can't happen or isn't going to happen. But also then, if that can't happen, making sure that we're resolving that with the parents and addressing any of their concerns, maybe in a way that other than how they're asking, but that they're at least addressed. My proposed plan, I would have started my plan before the meeting with the parent. I would have first talked with Mrs. Horton before the meeting, had a pre-meeting, kind of get an idea of these are the concerns that the parent is going to have. what are some of the things that we're going to talk about in there. These are some of the things you might want to consider. Kind of making sure that she was pre-wired for the meeting, showed that she was already prepped for the meeting, and as the administrator, kind of have an idea of what she's going to say. What kind of emotions is she going to be exhibiting when this topic is being talked about? I would have been talking with Mrs. Horton about the change in her behavior earlier, at the end of the previous school year. During those first couple weeks of school, I would have been monitoring, even coming back from summer break, talking to her, seeing why was the change different, just to get to know her, spending time focusing on that relationship, getting to know her more, understanding what are the things that are really making it more difficult for her, what stresses and everything else have been added. Now that she's basically a single mother, what I'm sure that's playing a big part in this. But again, what can we be doing as the administrator? I can't help act and provide coaching in that way if if I don't know about it. With her being so upset after that meeting with the parent, I see she's visibly angry still. I would just talk to her and say I'd schedule a time later on, either later in the day or early the next day, to talk about what had happened, give her time to calm down, myself time to calm down, and kind of formulate a plan, or at least a way I'm going to engage Mrs. Horton. At that meeting, I would talk with her about the behavior change that we've seen, the effects that it's had on her relationships and on the learning of her students, and then I'd work with Mrs. Horton on a plan to correct that. This plan would include, the overall implementing of the plan would be scheduling that meeting, reviewing the options for correction before I talk with Mrs. Horton. That way I can lay it out for her. These are the paths that we have. Talk to Mrs. Horton about her behaviors and options. Call parents to follow up about their concern and let them know how it's going to be addressed. Maybe I am gonna move the student, or maybe I'm not, but what's the plan going to be? How am I going to support that student and the other students, but that student in particular, for those parents that were upset in that meeting, or that dad who was upset in that meeting. And follow up periodically with Mrs. Horton to make sure that the changes or the plan that we put into place is being carried out. I'd continue to talk to parents, both the parents that were in the meeting, but also all parents of Mrs. Horton's students, about improved relations. And then I'd review her performance and adjust the plan periodically as things improve. Maybe we don't have to do as much, or continue going, or if it's not getting better, what else do we need to do to make it better? So unresolved issues, or resolving the issues. Ultimately, what's best for students is the reported behavior is improper with students, and students deserve a classroom where they feel safe, both physically safe but also emotionally safe. And if she's berating students and becoming angry and upset and yelling, that doesn't create a safe space for these kids. Her engagement, her changing level of engagement, likely affects the learning for students, and so we need to have her in a better mental place, better focused place, so that instruction and relationships can be better, because that's what's best for kids. And so my whole plan is going to be about getting the well-being of Mrs. Horton back to where it's normally has been, but then her teaching behaviors hopefully will follow suit with that, so that they are more effective for her kids, her students. Data from the class, most of this happened over about a 6-month period. There was definitely a behavior change, as we've talked about already, and then there were a lot of parent complaints that were coming up, and that's really where this principal got the most concern. Again, I'm hoping that as a school leader, I'd be reaching out to her if I was noticing those changes and trying to figure out how can I help her before it becomes an issue that parents are having to deal with themselves. Okay, and while I was thinking about that, or while I was reading through this and processing through this case study, I was ultimately thinking about, Mrs. Horton may need assistance dealing with the broader needs, not just her classroom behaviors, but supports in the community, supports with her kids, those kind of things, maybe some mental health support to get her and be able to cope with her new situation in a way that will allow her to be more effective in the classroom. I was thinking a lot of the things that were being done were very unprofessional and were really having an effect on kids. As a first grade teacher, we're setting these kids up to have this negative experience in the classroom that is going to be hard to overcome over the next few years. And so I just kept going back to that. I was feeling a lot of empathy for Mrs. Horton's needs, but also for the parents and the students and how they were having to deal with things. And then I was valuing a strong school climate that can probably withstand this, and probably have some other teachers, peers to Mrs. Horton, who may be able to support her as well. Parents, I valued parents that were advocating for the children so that we knew that this was going on. And I also value that district admin gave the principal, me in this situation, the opportunity to address it at the local level without kind of overreaching and trying to deal with the teacher themselves, kind of allowing the chain of command to work for this process. And then unresolved things that we still don't know. Again, going back to Mrs. Horton, we don't know what all is going on. I'd like to know if other peers, other teachers, other district administrators that maybe have been in the building or have interacted with her at professional development or other things, what have they been seeing? What concerns have they had? And then the most important unresolved issue is that conflict right after that meeting between the teacher and the parent. That's still present, and we have to work through this and make sure that that relationship can become strong again. It's going to be hard to overcome that, and that might be where, with this particular teacher and parent, it might not be wise to try and continue to pursue that. It might be better to start fresh with a new teacher where that parent can get a better relationship and stronger relationship with the school in general, just an overall more positive experience. So reflecting on the standards, the biggest thing I'm gonna do to be effective and efficient manager, an effective and efficient manager, is one, getting to know my staff and talking about performance. If this principal had been doing those two things, having just a culture where we talk about talking about performance all the time, those early behaviors would have been addressed. By getting to know your staff, you get to know what are their stressors, what are the things they're proud of, and by doing these two things, it would have helped resolve this issue, I think, a lot sooner. As far as with the social learning side of things, I would be modeling remaining calm and cautious myself, and I'd encourage reflection, empathy, and understanding of the common good of the situation. And then as far as addressing academic learning, making sure that clear expectations for Mrs. Horton about what behaviors are acceptable, make sure that I'm modeling, promoting those behaviors, focusing on her engagement as well as mine, so I'd probably become more engaged in that classroom, maybe a little bit more frequent visits, more frequent conversations with Mrs. Horton, and ultimately finding the data of, is this getting better or not? All right, that's my case study. I look forward to learning or seeing what everybody else has experienced with this. Great, and I hope everybody has a great start of the school year. Take care.